Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about making money as a cottage food operator in Florida. My name's Carol Roberts. I'm the Community Resource Development Agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension in St. Lucie County. There have been some recent changes to the cottage food laws in Florida, some exciting changes. So today we're going to talk about the Florida Cottage Food Laws, now referred to as the Home Sweet Home Act as of July 2021. And we'll go over what you can and can't do as a cottage food operator under that new act. Also, we're going to review a little bit of information about food safety and some recommendations you might apply to your cottage food operation. And we'll go over some steps in starting a business and talk a little bit about planning and making sure that you know what your vision is and what your purpose is so you stay on track as a business operator. And then we'll talk about some growth options for your cottage food operation, because once you reach the limit, your sales limit, and you're so successful as a cottage food operator, where do you go from there? So we're going to cover all of that over the next few minutes, and I appreciate you joining me for this talk on cottage food operation. I've heard from some people that the term cottage food is a little bit awkward, and it kind of comes from when we used to be able to have bake sales at our school, and the mom would make cookies for the school bake sale out of her home, and at one point somebody went, hey, wait a minute, they're selling that to other people. Is this legal? Aren't there food safety regulations? So our wise legislators came up with a program called Cottage Food, and actually there are cottage food laws in 48 of our 50 states. And Florida's, as I mentioned, Florida's cottage food laws recently changed. And they all vary in scope and requirements. Each state has their own particulars. For instance, in California, your cottage food recipe has to be reviewed and approved by some state department. In other states, you might be required to take a food safety course and have a food safety certification to be a cottage food operator. But we're going to focus on the cottage food laws in Florida. And cottage food laws focus on potentially non-hazardous food. So this is food that is not potentially hazardous as defined by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And the benefits of being able to produce that cottage food product, that non-hazardous food, out of your own home kitchen means that it's really easy startup. A lot of us already have a kitchen. Kind of handy. You can improve your personal income. We'll talk about just how much you can improve it in the next few slides. And also you being an entrepreneur in your community and selling to your neighbors and putting that money back into your community also helps the overall local economy. So you as a business operator help to improve the situation of all your neighbors. So let's break down how the cottage food laws in Florida actually work for you. Well, the most important thing, I think the most important thing about cottage food operation is that as a cottage food operator, you will be exempt from food permitting requirements. Commercial kitchens have a lot of guidelines that they have to meet, such as having a grease trap or having the proper temperature on the hot water heater to make sure that dishes are washed at the proper temperature. So, you won't have to deal with those restrictions because as a cottage food operator, you'll be making a potentially non-hazardous product. And the changes in the law allow you as a cottage food operator to make up to $250,000 gross sales of your product annually. So that's some nice income that you'd be able to bring in out of your own home kitchen, making a non-hazardous food product, something that is not temperature controlled for safety. We'll talk about that in just a minute. We'll also talk about the requirements a cottage food operator has for packaging and labeling their product, including samples that they might provide. And just so you know, as a cottage food operator, if you designate yourself as that cottage food operator, you are allowing that the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, FDACS as they're known, to investigate any complaints that are made about your product, which includes an inspection of your own home kitchen, the premises where the product was made. And if you refuse to allow FDACS to inspect your kitchen, you could face up to a $5,000 fine. So you don't want to get fined over your practices, and you definitely don't want to have any complaints about your product. So let's talk about the laws that you have to follow so that none of that happens, right? And, you know, there has to be guidelines regarding cottage food, because, you know, some people are not following those safety recommendations, the cottage food laws, and there's some confusion about exactly what's required and what's not. So let's talk about that for a second. The new change in the law preempts local municipalities from being able to require any kind of licensing for your cottage food operation. However, it does not stop them from preventing cottage food operation in their county. So for instance, Miami-Dade County is an area in Florida that I know of that does not allow cottage food product sales. So if you're located in the Miami-Dade County, this is you're going to need to, if you want to produce a food product, you're going to have to use a commercial kitchen. They don't allow cottage food operators in that county. So there are different requirements at the local level, city and county level, and but the new law exempts you, the city or county, from requiring that local level licensing. There's also confusion about what exactly, how a product has to be labeled, where you can and can't sell. There's some requirements that are needed for record keeping, because if the state has any questions about your ability to keep your gross sales below their required limit, they're going to want to see your records. So, and if there's, like we mentioned before, if there are any complaints, we want to make sure that there has been no confusion about food safety practices, and you're making a safe food product for your clientele. And so let's talk, we will explore the definition of a potentially hazardous food. And in exploring what foods are potentially hazardous, I like to say, think shelf stable. If it requires any kind of refrigeration or temperature control, it's not going to be a cottage food product. So here on your screen, you see a list of things that are allowed. Things like loaves of bread, rolls and biscuits, honey. If you have honey bees or honeycombs and you harvest the honey, you can sell that honey as a cottage food operator. You can make jams, jellies, and preserves out of the fruit trees, fruits that you grow in your yard. You can make some fruit pies and dried fruits, but those are fruit pies that are cooked fully and don't require refrigeration after they've been cooked. Seasonings and mixtures, those dry herbs, you can sell homemade pasta, but not cooked pasta. It has to be raw, because cooked pasta would have to be refrigerated, wouldn't it, to maintain safety standards. Coated or uncoated nuts, vinegar and flavored vinegars are allowed. Popcorn balls. Some other things I've had people talk about are marshmallows. So if you don't see the product you make on this list, feel free to contact the Florida Department of Agriculture and talk to someone and specifically tell them what product you're looking at. And they'll let you know right there and then if that is something that would be allowed as a cottage food product. If it has any kind of meat in it, it's definitely not a cottage food product. vegetables either. I know fruit pies, it says fruit pies are allowed. Absolutely not with the sweet potato or pumpkin pies. Those would have to be refrigerated. Um, any kind of fresh fruit or fresh vegetables that are cut, those are now processed, and that has to be done in a certified kitchen used under ServSafe guidelines. So that would not be a cottage food product. Notice beverages and pet foods and treats. There are no beverages that are a cottage food product. You can't make lemonade as a cottage food operator, brew coffee, you can roast coffee beans and even sell ground coffee, ground roasted coffee. But once you turn it into a beverage, that is no longer a cottage food product. Pet foods. There are specific laws related to making pet food, and cottage food operators do not fall under those laws. So no, making your biscuits for Fido to selling the extras is not a cottage food operation. So if you looked at that list and you didn't see what you make on the list of allowed items, like I mentioned, you might want to contact the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to verify that that is not a cottage food product, allowable cottage food product, or find out that it is. But bottom line, if that is not an allowable cottage food product and you still want to produce that food item, you're going to need to invest in a commercial kitchen of some sort. And because you'll have to make your product in a commercial kitchen. You can rent space in a commercial kitchen. There are some combined kitchens or kitchens rental space available in different parts of the state, and you can rent it by the hour, make your product, and then go sell it. You can, if you know a restaurateur that'll let you come into their kitchen after hours prepare your product in a certified commercial kitchen, then that might be an option as well. But it won't be something that you are allowed to make out of your own home kitchen and sell to other people if it's not a shelf-stable product. If it's temperature controlled for safety, it has to be made in a commercial kitchen. So if you're looking at going that direction, you'll need certain licensing, you'll need a ServSafe certification of some sort, you'll need a commercial kitchen space, and before you invest in that direction, you want to make sure that your consumer product has a market. You want to make sure that you are clear on your objectives as a business operator and understand the requirements for manufacturing and delivering that product under all the food safety guidelines and regulations that you'll be facing. For instance, if you're thinking about doing a salsa or some type of wet seasoning, you will probably be required to complete an acidified foods course and get a certification as a acidified foods operator. You can get information about where to find those courses from your county extension office. You'll also probably need a food manufacturing plan and a food safety plan. Those are some, just documents that show that you've looked at every aspect of your operation and identified where food safety issues might happen and talked about how to mitigate those at those locations. But if you are not producing a temperature controlled for safety product and you fall under the cottage food allowable items, that saves you from having to face all those requirements and regulations. Once you are sure that your food item is approved as a cottage food item, then the next thing to make sure is that you're producing it in an approved location. Under the cottage food laws, that boils down to your residence. These are things that are made in your own home kitchen. So as of July 2021, the definition of your own home kitchen is the primary residence of the business partners, whether it be one person or more than one. If you have a stated business with partners, perhaps an LLC that with more than one member, the primary residence of each of the members of that stated business is also an approved production location. That means that single kitchen in your residential home has no commercial equipment. That's a lot of sales to make, $250,000 worth of shelf-stable food to make out of a single kitchen with no commercial equipment. That's quite a task. But right, if you have a big, huge mixer for mixing up your batter, a commercial mixer, then that's not going to fit in your residential sink for cleaning, is it? So that's kind of the logic that the state has behind that. The commercial equipment is often too large to be appropriately cleaned in a residential kitchen. So we want to use residential equipment in our residential kitchen, and it should contain only one stove or oven. It could be a double oven. You know, above a lot of people have those ovens, double oven appliances, or even two ovens in the wall, but it can only be that situation. It can't be like having 2 or 3 stove oven situations lined up instead of your cabinets in your commercial kitchen. So think residential livable kitchen. Under unapproved locations are any place outside of your residential kitchen, like a permitted facility. Yeah, you cannot make your cottage food product in a commercial kitchen that's already been permitted for potentially non-temperature or potentially temperature controlled for safety foods. So it's already well past what you need for your cottage food operation. Outbuildings like garages, sheds, or barns are not an approved location. Making your honey in the living room instead of the kitchen is not an approved location. So just think your kitchen is, your own home kitchen is your approved production location. So once you have made that approved product in your approved location, now we need to know how to sell it appropriately in an approved way. So cottage food operators sell their product directly to the end consumer in different ways. What I mean by directly to the end consumer means that you may not wholesale your product. You can't go to a restaurant and say, hey, I've made this, do you want to buy it from me and sell it to your customers? Not allowed. You are the retailer as a cottage food operator. Also, no consignment. Hi, would you like to hold my cookies? And if you sell them, then you pay me a little bit of what you sold them for. Not allowed. You have to see that's bringing in a middle person, and we're not allowed to do that as a cottage food operator. So you are selling directly to the end consumer in a variety of ways. You can sell out of your primary residence. You can have your clients come pick up your brownies or cookies directly from your door, or you can deliver it to them, direct to consumer. You can set up a booth at a farmer's market and sell your product along with maybe a roadside stand or a flea market. You are allowed to sell to your customers from those locations. You are actually allowed now to sell on the internet. You can advertise your products and collect the money for those sales of your products over the internet. And now, as of July 2021, you are allowed to mail or ship the product that you sold to your client. That is a big change with the July 2021 update. So when you make that approved product that you're going to sell in an approved location after making it an approved kitchen, then you want to make sure that you label it properly. And the state of Florida is a little bit picky about this. They want to make sure that you put your physical location of where that product was made on that label. So no P.O. boxes, has to be the actual kitchen, the residential kitchen where the product was made. So you are going to put your name and your physical address on your label. You also want to give it a name. You can give it a cute name, but you have to give it some sort of a name. The best cookies in the world, the best chocolate chip cookies, who knows, whatever you want. My favorite cookies, grandma's cookies. But give it a name, and then you need to list the ingredients that you used in that product. And how you're going to do that, they're a little bit particular. They want you to list it in descending order of predominance by weight. That means you're going to look at all the different ingredients that you use to make that product, and the thing that you use most of, the heaviest of, I should say, is what you will list first. So maybe that's the milk or the flour or the sour, I don't know, sour cream. If it has sour cream in it, it probably is not shelf stable, right? The sugar, whatever the heaviest ingredient is. You don't have to list what the weight was, just in order of heaviest to lightest. So the last things you'll probably list are seasonings like cinnamon and salt and things you did a half teaspoon or a quarter teaspoon of. If there's a prepared item that you use, say here on the screen is example soy sauce. If you use soy sauce as a sub-ingredient, soy sauce actually has its own list of ingredients. So you have to list those out as well. You can't just say you use soy sauce. You would say wheat, soybeans, and salt, because that's how soy sauce is made in that weight order. So after you list the ingredients, you are required to put the weight, the net weight or volume of the product that you're selling. So if it's a cookie, measure out how you're going to, spoon it out, what tool you're going to use, and try to be consistent. That you measure out those first few samples that you scoop out, and once you're consistent, then you can put that same weight on each package. What you don't want to have to do is weigh every single package and write the volume on each label. Try to be consistent, save yourself some time and work. If there are any nutritional claims that you're making about that food product, then that has to be specified on the label in federal label requirements. So if you're saying that this item is gluten-free, make sure you're complying with federal definition of gluten-free and put that claim on the label. If you're claiming that it is dairy-free, make sure that you list that on the label. Also, and speaking of dairy, dairy is a potentially allergen-causing item, and any allergen producing ingredient needs to be noted also on the label. And here, let's see. Well, if you're not familiar with some of the major food allergens, here you go. These are the 8 major food allergens that you will want to be familiar with, so that you can list these on your label if you use any of these types of products in your cottage food item that you're making. Milk, egg, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish. Those are not going to be, fish and shellfish are meat products, so they're not going to be a cottage food product in the first place. Wheat and soy. If your product contains any of those ingredients as you're making it, then you're going to want to list that on the label to disclose any possible allergens for people who may be allergic to those items. Very important. So we've talked about this, and here's a great example of what you're supposed to have on your product label. You are required to have a statement out somewhere on your label. It doesn't have to be in all caps like mine is, but it has to be in the minimum of a 10-point font on your label somewhere, the phrase that says made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to Florida food safety regulations. those words in that exact way are very important. At least a 10-point font somewhere on your label. Make sure you have room for that along with the other requirements we talked about. Here's an example, the chocolate chip cookie, plain old name, made by, there's the name, and there's the address where that food product was made. And right below that, here's our ingredients list. Enriched flour. Oh, enriched flour actually has wheat flour, niacin, reduced iron, thiamine, and all these other ingredients. So we have to list that out as well. Butter. Butter is made from milk and salt. Shows you that on the package for the butter. So we need to take that information and transfer it to our label as well. We use chocolate chips that also have all these ingredients, as we saw on the package of the chocolate chips we bought. And our chocolate chip cookie also includes walnut, sugar, eggs, salt, vanilla, and baking soda. Oh, wow, we need to restate some of those ingredients because those are known allergens. Wheat is a known allergen. A lot of people are allergic to gluten. Eggs can be an allergen, milk, soy, the soy lecithin in the chocolate chips, and walnuts. A lot of people are allergic to nuts. So we had to specify those ingredients can cause allergens, or can be allergen producing. We are pretty consistent offering a 3-ounce cookie because we're using portion control to help things keep things easier for us, which equates to 85 grams, but that's not required to have that in both measurements. You only need it in one. I just went a little bit overboard to be consistent with other food labels. And there you see at the very bottom of the label, made in a cottage food operation that is not subject to Florida food safety regulations. So even though you think it might not fit, it will. Now, the Department of Agriculture does recognize that sometimes we need to provide our customers a sample to entice them to buy our product. So as long as you follow their guidelines, their rules, you are allowed to provide a sample. So what does that mean? It means that you have to pre-package those samples in your home where you have access to washing your hands and maybe some sort of packaging to wrap it in so that it's not just sitting out there for access to all the elements and everybody else's hands. So for example, if you have a slice of banana bread that you want it to package up for ingredients, you can package that at home in individual packages. It doesn't have to be labeled like the full item that you're selling does. Your samples don't have to have that full label, but they do have to be individually packaged, maybe in a little ramekin with a lid or some sort of foil or plastic wrap. And you have to do that in advance. You can't just say, hey, I ran out of samples. Let me pull this loaf of bread here while I'm at the farmer's market and cut it up into pieces and put a little toothpick in it for people to take. Not allowed. That is not a cottage food permissible task. So make sure you pre-package your samples, as many as you need for your event if you're going to be passing out samples. So we've talked a little bit about how to get your appropriate location for producing your cottage food item, your own home kitchen. Well, something to keep in mind as a cottage food operator is that you will be producing a food item for other people to eat out of your own home kitchen. Is your home kitchen ready to be treated like a commercial kitchen? Well, so you see on the screen an example of a kitchen that I hope we are not trying to make a cottage food product out of. And something to keep in mind as a cottage food operator is there are some people that are familiar with the cottage food laws. Even under its new name, the Home Sweet Home Act, they know that people are making a food product out of their own home kitchen, and some people are a little bit concerned what other people's kitchens look like. They have this vision that you see on your screen as that's where that food product is made. you as the cottage food operator would like to not present that connotation to your customer. You want them to maybe think of, oh, this other kitchen as the place where this beautiful food product was made. Nice, clean, sterile environment that lends itself to being a safe product. So let's talk about how to do that and set that image in your customer's mind and know for your own self that you are making a safe product for other people to eat. One thing you might want to do as a cottage food operator before you begin making your product each time is to do a home audit, your kitchen audit, to make sure that you are ready to be making that product. So you want to look at how clean your kitchen is. Is your kitchen prepared? Do you have your cutting boards and mixing bowls ready, or are you going to have to be digging through cabinets while you have flour and batter all over your hands? Which one is cleaner and safer? Make sure you have your proper ingredients and materials all laid out. Make sure that any perishable ingredients, those temperature controlled for safety food items that you might be using in your batter, like eggs or milk or butter, have been held properly before you're using it. You don't want to use a spoiled ingredient when you're making your product, because that can potentially make someone sick. You want to make sure that your overall cleanliness is something you've looked at. Is your garbage covered? Are there flies around? Are the kids and the pets excluded from your kitchen while you're making your product? What's the potential of the cat jumping up on the counter while you're scooping your batter onto your baking tray? If there's a potential for that, you might want to make sure that you block the cat out of the kitchen before you begin. So I know it's very hard to see on your screen. What's easier to see is the website where you can get this home kitchen audit document for yourself. Right there from Rutgers University, they provide this checklist that you can go through to make sure that you are ready to make your food product before you begin. Just one step that increases the potential for you to be making a safe product. So as you're making your non-temperature controlled for safety product, you still want to be aware of food safety basics. And over the next few slides, we're going to talk about the importance of food safety and some common food safety culprits to watch out for, and we'll go over some food safety practices that will help you to have more care in your home while you're making your product. It makes you and your customer more assured about the safety of your food product if you know these food safety guidelines. And something to mention here is, I did just mention how some potential customers are familiar with cottage food laws and know that people are making these products in their home kitchen, which might potentially not be as clean as they would hope. And you, as the cottage food operator, you can take steps to assure your customer that this food was made in a clean kitchen. How about at your booth, have a picture of you in your clean apron, standing in your beautifully clean kitchen with your batter bowls in front of you. Have somebody take a picture with your hair up and covered by a net or a hat, so they know that hair is not dripping in the food while you're making the product. That gives them an image of your conscientiousness to food safety. And foodborne illnesses are extremely dangerous, and we, as cottage food operators, do not want to perpetuate any foodborne illnesses. And Florida Department of Agriculture has set up their laws for cottage food operators as a way to reduce any potential for unsafe food products. But accidents can still happen, but we want to make sure we're doing our best to eliminate any foodborne illness potential, because it's so prevalent in the United States. You know, the CDC estimates estimates that there are more than 48 million cases of foodborne illness every year in the United States. They can only estimate because, most of us have pretty good immune systems, and we feel a little bit funny after we eat that thing. And, we might have one or two of these symptoms we see on the screen, but we recover. We go on and we go, ooh, don't want to eat that anymore. My body doesn't agree with it. Maybe something like that. So it goes unreported. Unfortunately, there's about an average of 325,000 reported or even hospitalized foodborne illnesses every year. And of that number, there's around 3,000 deaths per year caused by foodborne illnesses. And not only the loss of life, but the economic loss for those businesses like a cottage food operator or your local restaurant that faces an economic loss because of foodborne illness or even the rumor of a foodborne illness. So the restaurant business food business is pretty finicky. When I had my own restaurant, other restaurateurs would often share their mantra that if you do something right, the customer will tell you. If you do something wrong, the customer will tell everyone but you. And so those potential economic losses from a foodborne illness or the thought of one can be pretty high. So as cottage food operators, we don't want to face any kind of loss, but loss of human life or health or economic loss because of our food. We want to make sure we're aware of the potential hazards to food safety. And those come in three common types. There are bacterial hazards, from actual salmonella and E. coli bacteria that can grow in the food from unsafe handling. There are viruses that can get in our food. Those come from other people and are shared, like hepatitis A. Hepatitis A can only be spread from one food to another, or one infected person to another, through the ingestion of fecal matter. We're not going to go into detail on that, but these potential viruses can impact food safety. And then there are parasites that can get into the food that will affect the food safety. Other than that, there are also physical hazards. Be careful about hair or bones or fruit pits that should not be in the food being in the food. That's a potential food safety hazard. So we want to be careful about that. Chemicals. You could have a chemical food safety hazard if you are cleaning around your batter while it's rising and it's not covered. That overspray from the chemicals you're cleaning the counter with end up on that batter. That is a food safety hazard. So we want to be careful of the potential food safety hazards, the biological, the chemical, and the physical, that can impact the food we're making for other people. And there's some usual suspects that we hear about when we're talking about food safety issues. Hepatitis and E. coli. Salmonella is a common one. Mom always said, don't put the raw chicken on the cutting board and then touch other things. We want to wash our hands frequently, and that is the best way to combat these usual suspects is wash our hands. Proper and frequent hand washing, and making sure that we're holding our ingredients that we're using to make our cottage food product, we're holding that and handling it at the proper temperature for the proper time. If it's supposed to be cold, it needs to be 41 degrees or lower. If it's supposed to be hot, it's supposed to be 135 degrees or warmer. So proper time and temperature control is very important. And just to go over the basics of proper hand washing so we all know we're doing it right. Before you touch your food products, and anytime you've touched any potentially hazardous food product like eggs, the salmonella from eggs, or you touched a piece of raw chicken, wash your hands. And how to do that properly should take about 20 seconds. You want to use warm running water to rinse your hands, get your hands wet, apply soap, scrub vigorously for 10 to 15 seconds. This is where you're going to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to yourself once or twice to make sure you have a chance to clean your fingertips, between your fingers, the backs of your hands. Those are some of the common places we miss. And make sure you clean all the way up to the wrist. Act like a doctor. You're going into surgery. You want to make sure your hands are completely clean. Then you thoroughly rinse that soap off of your hands under running water and use a single-use paper towel or dry air to dry your hands. And that is the proper way to wash our hands. We don't often have a single-use paper towel at home, but if you are using your hand towel that you keep at your sink, make sure you're changing it often so that any food particles are not potentially rubbing off of where you just wipe the counter and onto your hands. I mean, just be careful about that. Some basic best practices for food safety. These are common things we do in restaurants when we work with food, serving other people. These are things we can do at home ourselves to make sure that we are ensuring food safety of our food product. We want to wash any produce we're using thoroughly. Get that dirt off. Wash away the residue from the pesticides and chemicals that they used in the field. Make sure that those fruits and vegetables don't touch surfaces that have been exposed to raw meat or poultry. Storing your food in the proper location. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So we want to be careful about that. Commingling items. Use clean utensils and cookware so that you're not spreading dirty food from place to place. Cook and cool and reheat food to the proper temperature and hold it for the appropriate time. And just a general guideline, even though we don't always have to, just avoid barehanded contact with ready-to-eat food. Once those cookies are done, wear gloves, use tongs or a tissue to put a barrier between you and your bare hands while you're packaging them up to sell. It's just a good safety practice. Avoid barehanded contact with ready-to-eat food. And you can prevent cross-contamination in your refrigerator and in your kitchen by storing things at the proper location. You'll see that this is a commercial refrigerator. Yours at home will look a lot different, but there is an order of how to store potentially hazardous food in your own refrigerator that's similar to this. Ready-to-eat foods, things that could, if something were to drip off that top shelf, nothing that would drip would harm what was below. And that's kind of the way to think about it. The most dangerous thing in your kitchen is that raw poultry. So that goes on the very bottom. If it drips, it's not dripping onto anything but the bottom of the cooler. The next most potentially hazardous type of food are ground meat and ground fish. This is hamburger meat. So you want to keep that. So the only place it could drip would be onto that poultry shelf. And so on and so on. So the ready-to-eat food, if something were to drip there, it would not be harmful to anything below it. And make sure your refrigerator is holding food at the proper temperature. You can use the gauge in your refrigerator or buy the shelf gauge and make sure that your refrigerator is calibrated correctly. Sometimes we notice that our lettuce is frozen, and that's a signal to us that our refrigerator may not be as calibrated, as it may not be cooling at the proper temperature, and we need to recalibrate it. Same thing happens with our ovens. Sometimes we notice that it said that frozen pizza would be done in 15 minutes, but 25 minutes later it's still not cooked. That might mean that our oven may need to be calibrated. You can go on almost any video streaming site and look up how to calibrate your oven and or your refrigerator, and make sure that your gauges are reading and reporting correctly so that you are meeting all your food safety guidelines. So that bacteria that I talked about a few slides back that is has the potential to grow those usual suspects, there's a way to control that bacterial growth, and we want to be careful about foods that are high in protein because they have a potential for bacterial growth. Things like, well, ground meats or baked potatoes once they're cooked. Those have a moist, high in protein environment that allows bacterial growth and movement. So we got to be careful with those kind of products. That's why, one reason why a lot of those products are not cottage food products. Acidic foods have highly, or in the middle range. If it's highly acidic or highly alkaline, there's less potential for bacterial growth, but most food products actually fall in the mid-range where bacterial growth has more potential. I talked about temperature and time control. Yes, we want to make sure that cold stuff stays cold enough and hot stuff stays hot enough, and we don't allow it to be out of temperature for more than 4 hours. Once you've let it stay out of temperature control too long, that ingredient needs to be tossed for food safety recommendations. Oxygen can affect the ability of bacterial growth as well as moisture. Bacteria needs a moist environment to be able to move from one product to another. So saltine cracker doesn't have a whole lot of potential for bacterial growth, but that moist environment of banana bread could. Well, that's why we want to make sure that we cook those breads fully to the proper temperature and prohibit that moisture that allows bacterial growth. And you'll notice that our friend Fat Tom, that's the acronym for these 6 potential bacterial growth situations. So just to summarize before we move on from food safety recommendations, that we want to make sure we follow all food safety guidelines. Be aware of Fat Tom. Be aware of time and temperature control. Make sure you wash your hands frequently and correctly. Store food at the proper temperature in the proper location, and keep your working environment clear of any potential hazards. Be careful with the chemicals you're cleaning with while your food is out, and just be aware of your surroundings, kids and pets, while you're cooking. And bottom line, like they say in the restaurant business, when in doubt, throw it out. You just do not want to take the chance on making anyone sick. So we've talked about how to make our product and how to make our product safely, and what we're allowed to do as a cottage food operator and what we're not. But let's talk about just the basics of being in business. If we're going to have the potential to have gross sales of $250,000, up to that dollar amount, we are going to have a legitimate business that's going to need some record keeping and some planning to make sure we're staying on track. And we'll talk about some pricing strategies too to make sure we're getting the best bang for our efforts, and look at where we can take our business as it grows. So let's get into the next topic. As I mentioned, there may be some local business requirements or regulations that you'll want to be aware of. If you're within the city limits, if your residence is within the city limits, you're going to want to talk to the city that you live within about any requirements they have. Also, the county that you live in. Even if you're within the city, you have to comply with city and county regulations. So you want to give them a call and find out what they require of cottage food operators. Because of the new law change in July, there may be some confusion. Just follow up and make sure you get a name and details of who you spoke to, so that if there's any kind of question, you can follow that up with where you got your information. So you want to make sure that you comply with any requirements for a business tax receipt permit. Any requirements related to having a home-based business in your county or city. In the state of Florida, if you're going to operate your business under a fictitious name other than your full name, then the state wants you to file a fictitious name filing and disclose who you actually are. That has to be done on a I think it's every 4 or 5 years. But something to stay on top of, and also be aware of any sales and use taxes that you need to file for your business. Most food products that you'll be buying are tax exempt for you to buy and for you to sell, but if there are any caveats to that, you want to be aware of that. Make sure you're collecting sales tax as needed. And then on a federal basis, if you're making in your business, you're able to bring home an income, you have to report that to the federal government. There might be a self-employment tax, or if you have, well, you can't actually have employees, but you could have a business tax. So be aware of those tax requirements and make sure you meet them, especially if you're getting close to your limit of $250,000 in gross sales. You might be setting off big red flags to your state or local leaders. As you're planning your business product, you want to make sure you're planning your business too. You want to identify why you do what you do. Is it because you want to make a gluten-free product for those people that have wheat allergens, and that's an important issue for you? Is it that you want to make the best sugar cookies ever? What is your purpose? That in identifying your mission, the mission of your business, that helps you to be able to quickly identify what you're not going to do and keep you from going down all the different rabbit holes that an entrepreneur tends to be able to fall into with, we could do this, we could do that. Well, you could, but is it going to be beneficial? Why do you do what you do? What are your limitations? What do you want to focus on? Where do you best maximize your resources? That all comes into your mission statement to help you identify what your mission is and what it isn't, so you can make better business decisions. You want to have a marketing plan so you can identify who are your potential customers. Are they just the gluten-free audience, or is it everybody who likes sweet cookies? Who knows? But identify that your customers, and the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, promotion, and people. That helps you know where your product is going, where your business is going. Your operation plan: identify what do you do and how do you do it? How many kitchens does it take? How much time in your own home kitchen does this require to meet your orders? You gonna have time to cook dinner for your family? Do you have space in your kitchen for all of that? Those are some good questions to ask before you get halfway through your first batch to meet all these pre-orders and find out it's a bit overwhelming. A little bit of planning on the operations side can make sure that things go smoothly for you. And then look at your financials. How much can you potentially make? What can you sell your product for in this market? And will that make you enough of a profit to succeed? Those are some parts of your business, the financial plan of your business. And just taking some time to jot down those things that you take a moment to think about is said to be the right thing to do while implementing the plan. Actually, once you identify it and actually doing it and making it happen, that's doing things right, sticking to your plan, so you're not all over the place. You have a focus and direction and a better potential for success. So that marketing mix I talked about, those 4 P's, here we go: production, price, place, and promotion. How do you package your product? How do you get the information about your product out to your potential audience, your target audience? What price level do you focus on? Are you the low-cost leader, or are you the quality leader that can demand $10 for a loaf of bread because it's just that good? And place, where are you selling? Where do people find your product? Those are all good questions to ask as you design your packaging material and how to meet the needs of your target audience. And record keeping is not why we go into business. All those business chores are not the reason. Nobody ever said, gee, I just love filling in spreadsheets about how every ingredient that I use to make my food product with, because that's what I really want to do in business. No, we want to make the food product, right? But record keeping is very important, especially if the state of Florida wants to make sure that you're falling within the cottage food operator guidelines. So it's important to keep records for legal and taxation purposes, to keep your receipts so that you can look at your different pricing strategies and maximize your profits. You want to make sure that you're keeping track of your inventory. When is it time to rebuy those supplies? And without record keeping, how do you know all those details about those great customers that you are trying to keep happy? There's a lot of reason to keep records and a lot of records to keep. So we want to make sure we keep those records organized. You can go simple with a file box or a folder, an accordion folder that has where you put your receipts for every month in a different section, or you might use a computer program or an app that helps you keep track of that. Something like QuickBooks or Wave. There's a variety of them out there. Find one that works for you. You may not want it to be too involved. You can spend a few dollars for monthly access to an app, or spend a few $100s for an actual program that you install on your computer. Different ways to go. But find one that works for you so that you can keep track of your customers, your money, your products, and your future. Also, when you're looking at keeping track of your records, you want to look at the different types of costs you're having so you can use those records to make better projections about your financials. And identify the best pricing method for your product. So first thing to think about in those cost considerations are, what are your fixed and your variable costs? You need to identify those. Some things are fixed costs. They don't change no matter how much of your product you produce. So even if you make one batch or 100 batches of your batter, the cost of the bowl for your batter is not going to change. That's a fixed cost. But if you're making one batch versus 100 batches of your batter, then the cost of your eggs is going to change. You're going to be spending a lot more on eggs for 100 batches versus one batch. So that would be a variable cost. The cost that goes up that varies with the number of batches you make. Also, your labor costs. A lot of us entrepreneurs don't consider our labor costs. We forget that this business needs to support the most important employee, the one who's working the hardest for it. So our time is valuable. What is the value of that time? That's our labor cost. We want to make sure we include that, so we're getting paid for our efforts. So those are some actual hard considerations, some real costs to consider, but then there are some cash versus non-cash costs. The value of word of mouth to advertise your product, that's a non-cash cost that you want to consider. You know, the value of the time it takes to make your product, that's a non-cash cost. So the different cost considerations that you want to think about and identify as you're looking at your pricing and your ability to make a profit. So speaking of profit, this is where we come down to the price. Where do we price our products so we can actually make money? Let's talk about the different ways to do that. Number one, you could go with the market price. I sell this awesome elderberry jelly that I make myself, and I know that other places are selling this same size elderberry jelly for $6 a jar. So I'm going to sell my jelly for $6 a jar. You can go with the market price and try to be a little bit lower than the market so you can be the low cost leader, or set it a little bit higher to connotate that your product is better than that other higher priced product. So that might work. Or you might look, that is one way to price your product. You might look at your break-even price though. Maybe, or maybe not, the market price is sufficient to cover your production costs and you can actually make a profit, but what if it's not? Let's look at the break-even price. Where do we have to sell, what dollar amount do we have to sell our product at to actually to break even with our costs? Well, here's an example. This person makes jellies. The ingredients for a batch cost about $15. Jars, I think there's 6 or 8 of them in a container, costs $8.80. So equipment operating costs, oh, you know what that would be? That would be operating the stove, the electricity to operate the stove while we're cooking down our fruit to make the jellies. And labor costs, oh dear, they forgot to include their labor costs. We'll talk to them about that later. But so let's see, if we add all that up, every time they make a batch of jelly, it costs $24.16. And then those fixed costs per batch, that would be the cost of the kitchen, or the spoon, the wooden spoon, the pan, which they calculated $2.30 had to be added to each batch to cover the cost of their fixed costs. So altogether, $26.46 it costs to make a batch of the jellies. So that the variable cost per jar, just the variable cost, at $3.02. They would cover their variable costs if they sold each jar of jelly for $3.02. But they wouldn't get all of their inputs back because it wouldn't be considering the cost of those fixed items like the pan and the spoon. So the total cost of the jelly per jar to break even with their actual expenses would be $3.31 per jar. Now anything they sell over $3.31 becomes the profit that they make. If they sell it for $3.50, they've made a whole 19 cents profit. See where I'm going there? So that's a price consideration, how to price your product. Make sure you're including not just your variable costs per batch, but the fixed costs per batch that need to be applied to every batch so that you recover all of your costs. So to carry this on just a little bit further, all right, we know our break-even price was what, $3.30 something, $3.32. Well, what if we just put a $4 price tag on it and sell 104 jars at $4 each? Would that be better than selling less jars at $5 each? Which one's going to get us a better return? If we sold 104 jars at $4 each, we'd make $416. But if we sold just 80 jars at $5 each, we'd make close to that, but not quite. Well, why would we want to sell less jars at a higher dollar amount? Well, let's see. Let's look at our margin. That variable costs, if we subtract the variable costs it took, not the variable and fixed, but the variable costs to make those 104 jars, we multiply the variable costs, $3.02 times 104 jars, that's $102 profit. But what if we only made 80 jars and we subtracted those variable costs from those 80 jars? 80 times 302 subtracted from our income of $416 leaves us, $158. There's a potential higher earning from selling less products at a higher price. We're making more dollars per item, which adds up faster and helps to cover those fixed costs. So when you're pricing your product, make sure you think about the potential of working smarter, not harder, selling less at a higher price. Would that get you the revenue that you're looking for? Different ways to consider your price. So bottom line, when you're looking at how to price your product, make sure that you separate costs, variable and fixed costs from each other, so you can evaluate how those amounts change your break-even price. And make sure you price your product to at least cover your break-even price per unit so that you can make a profit. Consider including the cost of your labor in your calculation, and decide whether your net return per labor hour makes your business worthwhile. Can this business support the most important employee, the owner, or is it more of a hobby? That's a question I think a lot of entrepreneurs are faced with at some point or another in their business career. And that's something that you'll want to consider as you're pricing your product. Wow, we have covered a lot over the last hour or so, and thank you for joining me for all this information. You potential cottage food operators are going to be so set up and ready to blanket the market with your product and be successful. So we learned today all about Florida's cottage food laws, as including the 2021 update. We talked about some food safety basics, things to keep in mind as you're preparing your products so that you comply with all food safety guidelines. And we talked about some business skills and the pricing of your product so that you can maximize your selling potential. And as your business grows, if you reach that $250,000 gross sales limit that the state of Florida enacted on cottage food products, well, then you'll start exploring the next steps that we talked about briefly, like a commercial kitchen space and the certifications that are required to commercially make a food product. So enjoy your cottage food operation, and thank you for joining me. You learned about all of this Cottage Food Home Sweet Home Act updates from your county extension office. An extension, if you're not familiar with it, has been around for more than 100 years. It is in every state in the nation. It's an extension of the land grant university in that state, and all extension does is produce research-based, non-biased information that residents can use to make better decisions on a wide variety of topics, including cooking, gardening, childcare, business operation, water quality, and more. So you have an extension office and extension agents in every county in Florida. We're just a phone call away, and we're there to provide you, like I mentioned, the research-based, non-biased information that you can use to make better decisions. When people say, what is extension? Keep in mind, we are not extension cords or hair extensions or even leg extensions. We are an extension of the knowledge of the land grant university in your state, and we're here to provide solutions for your life. Thank you for joining me. I'm Carol Roberts, your Community Resource Development Agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension in St. Lucie County, Florida.